A maintenance worker's urgent alert brought a chief executive to a complete halt, and the events that followed completely transformed an entire corporation. No one anticipates that a few words could bring everything to a standstill. Yet that's precisely what occurred outside a bustling business office in downtown Columbus, Ohio. The afternoon sun blazed overhead as staff members cheerfully chatted, glanced at their devices, and hurried to secure their midday meals. Then, without warning, a voice pierced the casual conversation, clear and pressing. "Stay away from that vehicle." People turned their heads, discussions ceased, and there in the center of the scene was Deshaun Ellison, the cleaning staff member whom most barely acknowledged. His cleaning bucket lay overturned on the asphalt, sudsy liquid spreading across the stone surface. However, his gaze, alert and focused, wasn't directed toward his equipment. Instead, he stared intently at the company's CEO, Victoria Whitfield. Victoria was renowned for her composure. She moved like someone with clear direction, her high heels striking the ground rhythmically, her luxury handbag moving just enough to signal her distinct status. Few employees would dare to interrupt her routine. Yet this situation wasn't about hierarchy or protocol. This concerned immediate threat. She held the handle of her dark SUV, keys prepared, when she suddenly stopped. Deshaun's tone wasn't conversational or courteous. It carried that uncommon urgency of someone who couldn't spare time for social niceties, only immediate action. Victoria whirled around, her expression sharp, initially bewildered and irritated. "I beg your pardon," she declared, her words cutting through the quiet. Deshaun remained unflinching. He gestured forward. "Stay away from that vehicle." For an instant, the entire lot seemed to pause in anticipation. Then movement occurred, the type that creates a sinking feeling in your chest. An individual whom nobody had previously observed emerged from behind the SUV. His grip was already positioned on the door. His gaze shifted nervously between Deshaun and Victoria, caught in his attempt. Move backward," Deshaun commanded, his tone more forceful. Victoria stumbled in reverse, her costly footwear making unsteady sounds on the pavement. She wasn't accustomed to receiving orders, particularly delivered this way, but something in Deshaun's voice compelled her to comply. The individual near her SUV paused momentarily too long, providing sufficient time for security personnel to take notice. 2 officers stationed near the entrance rushed forward, calling out. The suspect released the handle and fled, weaving through the parking area and vanishing among the vehicles. Sharp intakes of breath filled the atmosphere. A staff member let her coffee fall. Someone murmured, "What occurred?" Another whispered, "Was he attempting to?" Victoria remained motionless, her breathing rapid and shallow. She had confronted conference rooms filled with men double her age, investors controlling vast fortunes. However, in that instant, she experienced something unfamiliar, helplessness. And the individual who prevented it from escalating into something catastrophic was someone most of the organization only noticed during evening hours, pushing a cart filled with cleaning materials. Deshaun approached carefully. "Are you unharmed?" he inquired, his voice gentler now, as though addressing a friend rather than the head of a major corporation. Victoria regarded him with new eyes this time, not with irritation or dismissal, but with something approaching respect. Most staff at Whitfield Industries recognized Deshaun Ellison only in passing. They observed him during late shifts, guiding his cart through polished corridors, earphones in place, quietly maintaining the workspaces that had been filled with beverages and partial documents throughout the workday. To them, he remained part of the scenery, unseen, expendable, simply another uniformed employee. What they remained unaware of was that Deshaun's history extended well beyond those building walls. He was a single parent raising his 8-year-old daughter, Isla, in a humble 2-bedroom residence in Reynoldsburg, just outside Columbus. Each morning, he prepared her for classes, assembled her meal, and ensured she never departed without hearing him declare, "Keep in mind, you possess more strength than you realize." This served as his personal motto, words he wished someone had shared with him during his childhood. Circumstances had been challenging. He had previously aspired to complete his education, perhaps pursue teaching in history, his preferred subject. However, when Isla's mother abandoned them, leaving him with an infant and no assistance, aspirations had to yield to practicality. The maintenance position wasn't prestigious, but it provided stability and maintained their household. Meanwhile, Victoria Whitfield's existence bore no resemblance to his. She matured in Cleveland Heights within an expansive residence where her father practiced as a distinguished lawyer and her mother organized charitable events. Following her MBA from Stanford, she advanced through corporate ranks with remarkable speed. Recognized for her keen intellect and even more cutting remarks, she didn't merely manage Whitfield Industries, she embodied it. Her office occupied the building's highest floor, featuring wall-to-wall windows displaying the urban landscape. People claimed she could handle million-dollar negotiations while browsing her device without showing any strain. She conducted herself like someone who understood she consistently held the highest intelligence in any gathering. Yet despite all her prosperity and position, Victoria possessed certain limitations. She was familiar with admiration, fear, or jealousy from others, but never warnings, never protection, and certainly never from someone wearing maintenance attire. Therefore, when Deshawn called out to her in the parking area, the entire relationship between them transformed instantly. He was no longer invisible. That afternoon, news traveled quickly throughout the company dining area. Administrative staff whispered about the incident between salad bites. Department managers gathered near beverage stations, discussing whether the individual had been a criminal, stalker, or something more threatening. Everyone reached the same conclusion: the maintenance worker had rescued the CEO. Meanwhile, Deshawn returned to his duties, quietly cleaning the floor near the elevators as though nothing unusual had occurred. That reflected his character. He avoided attention, simply wanting to complete his responsibilities and return home to ILA before her bedtime. However, something felt different about that day. He sensed eyes tracking him through the corridors. He caught his name mentioned like a confidential matter. Deep down, he understood that the woman central to these events, Victoria Whitfield, wouldn't allow this incident to pass without addressing him personally. His intuition proved correct, because within 24 hours, she summoned him to her office, a place he had never dared to enter. What she would tell him during that meeting would leave him completely astonished. The following afternoon, the scene replayed in Deshawn's thoughts. He had returned to the main entrance, clearing debris that people had tracked from the parking area. The glass entrance swung open as employees emerged, sunglasses on, laughing and checking devices, prepared for lunch. Victoria Whitfield exited last, her movement swift and determined as always. Her black SUV gleamed under the noon sun, positioned mere feet away. Everyone around her was engaged in personal conversations, but Deshawn remained alert. He had developed the ability to observe details others missed. That's when he spotted him, a man in a gray sweatshirt positioned unusually close to Victoria's vehicle. He wasn't searching for keys or checking his phone. He remained motionless, observing, waiting. Deshawn tightened his grip on the broom. His heart pounded once, forcefully. He looked around, nobody else had noticed. Victoria reached into her bag, retrieved her keys, and moved toward the SUV. Deshawn's intuition alarmed him. He dropped his broom, stepped forward, and called out, his voice echoing across the area, "Stay away from that vehicle." The sound interrupted every conversation as heads turned. Victoria froze mid-step, frowning with clear annoyance. "Excuse me," she said, raising her eyebrow. Deshawn didn't waver. He pointed toward the SUV. "Stay away from that vehicle." Victoria's hand hovered near the handle. At that moment, the hooded man moved. He reached for the door quickly and deliberately. "Hey," Deshawn barked, advancing. "Step back from the car." The man's eyes darted nervously, caught in the act. He hesitated, then pulled the handle. It was locked. He muttered something under his breath. Victoria stumbled backward, heels clicking against the pavement. "What's happening?" she demanded, her voice now shaky. Deshawn raised his voice while keeping his eyes on the suspect. "Security. Over here." Two guards positioned near the lobby entrance raced across the lot, radios crackling. The man released the handle and sprinted, weaving between parked cars. "Stop him," one guard shouted. But the man was quick. Within moments, he had disappeared, absorbed by the street beyond the lot. The silence that followed felt heavy. People stood frozen with their lunches partially unwrapped, some recording with phones. Others whispered, attempting to understand what had just transpired. Victoria's complexion was pale, her breathing irregular. She wasn't used to feeling shaken like this. She looked at Deshawn, still positioned in front of her SUV like a protective barrier. "What did you observe?" she asked. Deshawn's chest rose and fell. "I noticed him waiting. I'm uncertain of his intentions, but they weren't good. You were about to walk directly into danger." Victoria swallowed hard. For the first time in years, she felt vulnerable, as if someone else had controlled a moment that could have gone terribly wrong. "Thank you," she said quietly, almost to herself. Deshawn nodded once. "I couldn't allow it to happen." The guards returned, slightly breathless, radios still buzzing. "We're contacting Columbus PD immediately," one informed Victoria. "We'll examine the cameras to see if we can obtain a clear image." She simply nodded, distracted, still staring at Deshawn. Employees began murmuring, some too loudly. Did the janitor just rescue? Inside the glass doors of Whitfield Industries, the atmosphere had changed. Conversations that typically focused on quarterly reports or weekend activities had shifted to one topic: what had occurred in the parking lot. By the time Deshawn returned to the lobby with his broom and bucket, whispers echoed off every polished surface. A pair of junior analysts stood near the elevators, one saying, "She was moments away from entering." Moments. The other shook his head, and it was him of all people who stopped it. Deshawn kept his gaze down, pushing his cart toward the storage closet. He wasn't interested in stares or casual conversation, but stares followed him regardless. Near the reception area, a woman with a headset leaned toward her colleague. "I heard he shouted at her, at her." "Can you imagine yelling at Victoria Whitfield like that?" Her colleague whispered back, "Yes, but he saved her life." "That's different." "Still," she murmured, "if it were me, I'd be clearing out my desk. CEOs don't appreciate being told what to do." Deshawn closed the closet door behind him, exhaling as he leaned against the wall. He wasn't worried about his employment, at least not yet. But he understood how systems worked in places like this. When you wore a uniform with someone else's company name stitched on it, you rarely emerged as the hero. Meanwhile, upstairs on the 12th floor, Victoria paced her office. Her assistant, Holly, stood beside the desk, holding a folder. Security has already contacted Columbus PD. They're examining the footage. They'll reach out once they have more information." Victoria pressed her palm to her temple. "And the man?" "Gone. No trace yet. He moved too quickly." She turned toward the massive windows overlooking downtown. The city appeared calm, indifferent. She felt anything but calm. For the first time in years, she had felt powerless, seconds from danger she hadn't even detected. And the one person who had seen it, who had prevented it, was the janitor whose name she didn't even know. Victoria whispered almost to herself, "Who is he?" Downstairs, as Deshawn stepped back into the hallway, he encountered one of the accountants, a man named Greg. Greg gave him a long look before smirking. "Didn't think you had it in you," he said. Deshawn frowned. "What do you mean?" "You know," Greg shrugged. "Standing up like that? Thought guys like you just cleaned up after us." Deshawn's jaw tightened, but he remained quiet. He'd dealt with men like Greg his entire life, the type who measured worth by job titles and salaries. Instead of responding, he simply wheeled his cart down the hall. At that very moment, Holly stepped off the elevator, scanning the lobby. When her eyes found him, she approached. "Mr. Ellison?" she asked, checking her notes. He nodded cautiously. The elevator ride to the 12th floor seemed longer than it should have. Deshawn stood in the back corner, his mop bucket and cart left behind downstairs. Holly tapped her pen against the folder she carried, eyes forward, silent. When the doors opened, the environment changed instantly. The 12th floor differed from the others. Plush carpeting replaced polished tile, artwork decorated the walls, and the air carried a faint scent of expensive cologne. People in tailored suits moved quickly, but their eyes glanced toward Deshawn as if questioning his presence there. Holly led him to a pair of tall glass doors at the hall's end. She knocked once, then opened them slightly. "He's here, Miss Whitfield." "Send him in," came the voice from inside, firm and composed. Deshawn stepped forward. The office enveloped him completely, floor-to-ceiling windows, a sleek mahogany desk, bookshelves lined with awards and framed photographs. Behind it all stood Victoria Whitfield, her posture perfect, her tailored navy dress immaculate. For a moment, neither spoke. She studied him the way an investor might examine a proposal, carefully, with measured curiosity. Finally, she said, "You're the man who shouted at me yesterday." Deshawn cleared his throat. "Yes? Deshawn Ellison." "You realize," she said slowly, "no one ever yells at me like that." He gave a faint half-smile. "I figured I'd only get one opportunity to prevent you from walking into something dangerous. Didn't have time to worry about politeness." Her lips twitched slightly, almost as if she was amused, but then her expression hardened. "Tell me what you saw." Deshawn recounted the moment, the man by the SUV, how he waited, how his hand moved to the door. His words were simple and direct. He didn't embellish it. When he finished, Victoria leaned back against the edge of her desk, arms crossed. "So you trusted your instincts?" I trusted what I observed, Deshawn replied, and I trusted that if I remained silent, something worse would occur. The room grew quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of traffic below. Finally, Victoria asked, "Do you always pay that much attention to your surroundings?" Deshawn hesitated, then nodded. "When you've experienced the life I've had, you don't have the privilege of looking away. You observe things. You must." Her eyes softened briefly before sharpening again. "I owe you gratitude," she admitted. "But I also need you to understand that yelling at me in front of employees isn't something that goes unnoticed. People are talking." "I'm sure they are," Deshawn said. "But if I had to do it again, I'd handle it the same way." That response hung in the air, honest and unapologetic. Victoria tilted her head, studying him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Most people in her sphere bent under pressure, eager to please, eager to impress. This man wasn't trying to impress her at all. "Do you know what's happening downstairs right now?" she asked. Deshawn shook his head. "Half the building is gossiping about you," she said. "Some consider you a hero. Others think you overstepped boundaries." By the following morning, Whitfield Industries resembled more of a high school cafeteria than a Fortune 500 company. Gossip attached itself to every corner of the building. In the break room, a group of interns clustered around the vending machine, whispering. "I heard the janitor practically saved her life." Saved her or just yelled at her? Big difference. "No, I swear security said he scared the guy off. The CEO owes him everything." Across the hall, two executives carried their salads to a table, lowering their voices as they sat. "It's ridiculous. Now the staff thinks he's some kind of hero. Better than them thinking she was careless enough to almost get attacked in broad daylight." The first man snorted. "Trust me, she won't like that either." Everywhere Deshawn went, conversations quieted, heads turned. Some people smiled at him. Others examined him with suspicion, as if he had stepped out of line. On the 10th floor, one of the analysts whispered just loudly enough for him to hear, "Imagine being a janitor and suddenly thinking you're the star of the show." Deshawn didn't respond. He had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the best reaction. He just kept his mop moving, one corridor after another. But not everyone saw it that way. Later that afternoon, as he cleaned near the HR department, a woman in a navy blazer approached. "You're Deshawn, right?" she asked. He nodded cautiously. "I just wanted to say thank you. Not everyone would have spoken up the way you did." He gave a polite smile. "Anyone would have." She shook her head. "No, that's the thing. They wouldn't." Her words stuck with him. For every snide comment or sideways glance, there were a few who genuinely seemed grateful. It was confusing, being invisible one day and impossible to ignore the next. Upstairs, Victoria listened quietly as her leadership team debated in her office. One executive insisted, "You can't make a spectacle of this. He's a janitor. Thank him privately. Maybe give him a bonus, but don't turn it into a show." Another countered, "With all due respect, if word spreads that he saved you and you brushed it off, it'll look terrible. The staff admires him now. If you downplay it, you risk losing their trust." Victoria didn't respond immediately. She simply looked out the window, the city sprawling beneath her. She remembered the sound of his voice, sharp and commanding, "Stay away from that vehicle." She remembered how quickly he reacted when no one else did. She wasn't the type to be influenced by gossip, but she wasn't blind either. Something about this wasn't simple. Downstairs, Deshawn finished his shift in silence, pushing his cart toward the service elevator. He knew the company's attention was on him now, waiting to see what would happen. And he had no idea that Victoria Whitfield had already made her decision. Because while the building gossiped and speculated, she was preparing to do something no one, least of all Deshawn, expected. 2 days later, the rumor mill reached its peak. By mid-morning, people couldn't stop speculating. Would the CEO ignore the whole situation? Would Deshawn get fired for stepping out of line? Or would he quietly fade back into obscurity, never mentioned again? No one expected what happened at 11 a.m. The email hit every inbox at Whitfield Industries simultaneously. All staff are required to attend an emergency meeting in the main conference hall at noon. Confusion spread instantly. Some thought it was a financial crisis. Others thought a major merger was being announced. But when noon arrived and the entire building packed into the wide conference space on the ground floor, the truth stunned them all. Victoria Whitfield walked to the podium, heels clicking sharply against the floor. The room went silent. She placed her notes on the stand but didn't look down at them once. Instead, her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on someone in the very back. 2 days ago, she began, her voice steady but carrying weight, something happened outside this building. Something I cannot and will not ignore. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People leaned forward, eager. She continued, a man attempted to get into my car while I was approaching it. I was seconds away from making a terrible mistake, one that could have ended very badly. And the only reason it didn't is because someone here saw what no one else saw. He didn't hesitate. He didn't care about rank or status. He didn't stop to wonder whether it was his place to speak. He simply acted. All eyes followed hers to the back of the room. Deshawn stood stiffly, trying not to be noticed. Now every pair of eyes was on him. Mr. Deshawn Ellison, Victoria said clearly, you saved me, and for that, I am grateful. Gasps spread through the hall. Some people clapped hesitantly, unsure if applause was appropriate. Others whispered furiously. Victoria raised a hand. But gratitude is not enough. What he demonstrated that day, awareness, courage, and responsibility, is exactly what I demand from my leaders. So today, I am announcing something unexpected. Mr. Ellison will no longer be working as a janitor in this building. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria let it linger before continuing. Effective immediately, he will begin training under our security division. If he chooses to accept, he will be on track to a full-time role with benefits and advancement opportunities. Because people like him, people who protect, who notice, who act, deserve more than being overlooked. The room erupted. Some employees clapped loudly now, while others whispered in disbelief. A few sat stone-faced, refusing to react. In the back, Deshawn's mouth opened slightly. He hadn't expected recognition, let alone this. Victoria locked eyes with him. Mr. Ellison, she said, her voice steady but warm, this company needs people like you. I need people like you. The question is, will you accept? All eyes burned into him. When the meeting ended, the crowd spilled back into the hallways, buzzing with conversation. Some shook Deshawn's hand as they passed, murmuring, congratulations. Others avoided eye contact, their silence louder than words. Deshawn didn't care about the whispers anymore. What mattered was the phone call he made that evening. He sat in his car, hands still trembling slightly from the whirlwind of the day, and dialed the one number that grounded him. Daddy? Isla's small voice came through, filled with the same warmth that always steadied him. Hey, baby girl, he said, his voice softening. How was school? Good. We had art class today. I painted a butterfly. He smiled, eyes closing for a moment. That sounds beautiful. I can't wait to see it. There was a pause before she asked, did you have a good day at work? Deshawn chuckled. You could say that. Something big happened. Daddy's not going to be cleaning floors anymore. I got a new job. A better one. One where I get to keep people safe. Really? Isla gasped. Like a superhero? He laughed, shaking his head. Not quite, sweetheart, but something like that. Her joy poured through the phone. I'm proud of you, Daddy. Those words hit harder than any applause from the conference hall. That was what it was all for, the long nights, the hard shifts, the moments when he thought he'd never escape the shadows. The next week, Deshawn began his training with the security division. It wasn't easy. The physical drills were exhausting, the protocols complex, but he threw himself into it with the same determination that had carried him through years of sacrifice. Slowly, he began to shed the role of the invisible janitor and step into something new. Some colleagues welcomed him warmly. The guards who had chased the man in the hoodie treated him like family, often saying, "We're lucky to have you on our team." But others still muttered in corners, convinced he hadn't earned the promotion. One afternoon, Greg cornered him in the cafeteria, sneering. "Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts. People like you don't stay at the top for long." Deshawn didn't flinch. He just looked him in the eye and said, "I don't need the top. I just need to show my daughter what's possible." Then he walked away. Meanwhile, Victoria kept her word. She checked in on him occasionally.